Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2316. Today I'm talking to the founder of a rather new website. It's a community for enthusiasts, hobbyists, and collectors. I think you're going to enjoy it. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. I'm on the East Coast today, Port Washington, New York, with a very special guest by the name of Will Sellenraad. Will, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have it in gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
I sure am, Mark. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right, we'll have some fun. Now, before we do get started, though, I always ask all my guests, what's one little thing that most people don't know about you, Will?
I think that, one thing that a lot of people may not know is that my wife and I founded a technology company, and we pioneered electronic filing for attorneys. And it was the first successful production e-filing system in the U.S., and that was in the late 90s.
Wow, how cool is that? Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, you think of the late 90s, and when people say that, I kind of think, well, that wasn't that long ago. And then I went, yeah, it was, especially in the tech world, right?
Oh, yeah, that was the whole dot-com era.
Well, I do remember that because the company I was working with, we hired a lot of those folks that lost their jobs when that whole bubble burst,
Oh,
Yeah. So, and we had a few people that left going, oh, this company's cool. They got ping pong tables and free coffee. And I'm like, okay. And then a year later, I need my job back. I'm really good at ping pong, but I have no income. Yeah, exactly. Well, let's dive into it. Will Sellenraad is the founder of Collector Chassis, a community for enthusiasts, hobbyists, and collectors to showcase, spectate, buy, and sell vintage, classic, and special interest vehicles. Will is an entrepreneur in the IT service industry. He's held a variety of executive management positions, including CRO, co-founder, and president in the company he mentioned in our previous discussion. His experience includes growing startup companies to over $25 million in revenue. His car addiction began at a very young age, building model cars, sounds like me, and from there it grew into fixing up real cars, going to autocross events, and buying his own enthusiast cars. We'll learn a lot more about Will and what he's doing today at Collector Chassis, but first a word from our sponsors. So give them a little love. They keep the gas in the tanks here. Buckle up, and we'll be right back. Years ago, when it was time to renew my collector car insurance policy, my carrier's rates went up, way up, but my usage was the same, and I never made a claim. I didn't even have a ticket. So what's with that? So I turned to American Collectors Insurance. Has your collector car insurance recently raised your rates for no good reason? Tired of paying an annual membership fee? Then it's time to look around and call American Collectors Insurance. I shopped around, I asked friends for recommendations, and found a winner that I can trust. And boy, I'm glad I did. I saved hundreds of dollars every year and slept better at night knowing my baby was properly insured. American Collectors Insurance have been protecting vehicles since 1976. They provided me with an agreed value insurance policy backed by their history of taking great care of their clients. What could be better than that? So give them a call and ask for a quote today. 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. And protect the ones you love like I did with American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. So, Will, we are back. So let's talk a little bit about Collector Chassis, because this is a rather new company, and I had a really weird coincidence. Yesterday, a good friend of mine, Paul, and I were speaking, and he said, "Oh, you got to interview this guy named Will with Collector Chassis." And I said, "Well, coincidentally enough, he's calling me in the morning." So there you go. So it's a small world. How did this idea come about? And tell our listeners, what is Collector Chassis?
Well, so the idea came about, actually, I'm a BMW CCA member, and whenever I would get the Roundel magazine, I would always see in the section on letters to the editor, people would be posting their cars and wanting to share them with the community. And I would think to myself, gosh, that's pretty cool. I wonder how many cars members have. What different cars do they have? Is it always BMWs? Do they have other makes and models? And I thought it would be pretty cool to create an online community where people could showcase their cars and share them among other like-minded car collectors. And so that was really kind of what started Collector Chassis.
Well, I've been a member of that same club for 20 plus years now, I think. So, and I see those letters to the editor, and people will show pictures of their cars and so forth. So you took it that next step and said, "Oh, how can we create this online community for people to share all of these things?" And maybe you can walk our listeners through the different parts of your website, because I was playing around on it a little bit last night and went, "Oh, this is kind of cool." It's like having a bunch of friends, but they're all over the place that you maybe can't go to their cars and coffees, if you will. But at least you can share what you have. And there's one thing I know, having done this podcast for 9 years and been a car guy my whole life, is people love to share their vehicles.
They really do. And, there's so many different outlets to do it. And I thought if we could pull them all together, all the different social media sites, all the different forums, the different clubs, and pull it together into one site where people could showcase their cars, they could tell their stories, because everybody's got a story about each one of their cars, what makes them special. And so that's really how we started. People started putting their cars on. It started to amaze me how collectors have so many cars. I mean, I've got collectors that have some of their cars on the site, but they have actually anywhere from 60 to 100 cars, which is an extreme collector, I guess, from my definition. But it just amazes me people actually have that many cars. So we started to have people showcase their cars. That's one aspect to the site. And then I figured out, well, we better figure out a way to monetize this, because we can't just provide this service for free. So then we came up with the idea of the auction and the general listing. So we have the typical reserve auction where if the reserve is met, the vehicle sells. And then when the vehicle did not sell, where the reserve was not met, we thought, well, what are we going to do with this vehicle now? Does it just leave the site? And actually what it does is it goes back into a owner's collection. So everybody has their own collection page, and they can put all their cars on their collection page. They can showcase them. And then if they want to sell them, they just click the Sell My Car button. They can create an auction where reserve is met, the vehicle sells. Now we have where if the reserve is not met, people can make an offer or buy now on the car in their collection. And then we also added general listing, because there are just some people who are turned off by the idea of auctioning their vehicle, and they kind of like the old classified version of just listing their vehicle. And so what we did, instead of just having a buy price, we say, why don't you make an offer, or we give them the option to click on the buy now price, because most people like to negotiate when it comes to buying a vehicle. And so we give them that option to do that. So it's showcasing your car, and it's reserve auction or a general listing to buy and sell your car.
Are there limits to the types of cars that people can bring in? Is it really more just anybody with a car they love and enjoy?
Yeah, it's really that way, Mark. When you showcase your car, there is no charge to do that. We don't limit the number of cars you can put on your collection page. You can put cars you've owned, cars you've sold, or cars that you're selling on your collection page. And we give you up to 12 photos per vehicle and 1 video per vehicle to showcase your cars. And then, of course, if you want to sell a vehicle in a reserve auction or in a general listing, you can have up to 120 photos in a video. But when you go to sell your vehicle, we really do all the work for you. So we write your listing, we give you a Dropbox to upload your photos. We really make sure that it's a very presentable listing, whether it's an auction or a general listing, but we do all the work for you. The other thing we do is when it comes to selling your vehicle, we put it on popular car sites, we put it on social media, but we really promote it as opposed to just having a online presence on Collector Chassis. We expand it as much as we possibly can to not only attract more users to the Collector Chassis site, but give your car a lot more exposure.
Well, that's cool because there's several sites out there these days. I've had some on my show that are aggregators that try to pull in all this information to their site too. And they're not necessarily selling cars. They just want to present all these things. So yeah, it's all about how do you get found? And in this jungle that is the internet now in the car world, we were talking about that in our pre-show chat, is where do you go to find things and how do you discover what exists and so forth? And sometimes I come across things and I go, how come I didn't know about that? I should know about everything. I'm cars, for goodness sake. But you can't. It's so, the universe has gotten so huge.
Well, and that's why we're trying to create more of a community and do something different than just a one-dimensional auction or a listing site. But we really are working hard to create this online community where you can look at someone's collection page, you can look at their profile, you can see cars that they bid on, cars that they own, where their expertise is, and you can reach out to them and ask them questions. So if you want to buy early model Porsche or a late model Porsche, as an example, we were talking about Porsche earlier, and you want to find an expert, you can go to the site, you can look at someone's collection page, you can see the different kinds of Porsche that they collect, and then ask them questions, reach out to them. So we're trying to create a site that is informative, that becomes a destination for people, but also where people can connect and develop relationships. And hopefully they'll be long-lasting relationships. But the common denominator is Collector Chassis.
Very cool. Now, I understand, and I learned this yesterday when I was talking to my friend Paul, who's also been on the show here, DeCruz, you have formed a relationship with the BMW Club, which is very cool. And as I said, you and I both have been members for a long, long time. Explain how that came to be, because I found it really fascinating, and I think it dives a bit into how your brain works of seeing an opportunity that's right there on the pages, when you think about old-fashioned Turn magazine type thing, that you've turned into what you're doing with them.
Yeah, I think, times are changing for all the clubs, and, they've got a set membership that's starting to age gracefully, I guess I'll say.
I'm trying to do that.
Yeah. And there's a younger generation of car collectors that have been brought up in online, right, through social media or whatever online they experience that they like. And so I started thinking back to the whole reason of creating Collector Chassis, which was people showcasing their cars. And I thought, this might be a pretty cool idea. I ran it by the BMW CCA board. I talked to Eddie and Frank and some of the other key people there. And, it took a while, but after a couple of years, it kind of took root. And we thought, let's bring the BMW CCA community online, let people showcase their cars online, communicate with each other online, and buy and sell their cars online as well. And we came up with a model where the more people showcase their cars, the more they buy and sell, the more they actually support and grow the club. And we bring in a younger audience who is really grown up online. So it's really starting to take root and grow as we get the name out there.
I think it's great. Something I've noticed post-COVID, going to car events, and I just returned from the La Jolla Concours, and I was down there at an event that's grown really big in Rancho Santa Fe that started as the Secret Car Club. Chris Erickson, who's been a guest on the show, and then a lot more people started coming in, and it got out of control, so he moved his club elsewhere. They go to private tours, but the Cars and Coffee, I won't call them hooligans, but they were a little bit more lively group, let's say, stayed there, and it grew. So the tour for the Concours was going through Rancho Santa Fe. And what I noticed was there were a lot of young, like high school kids there, and not just standing around, but creating content. I saw with incredible cameras and groups of kids that were working together and trying to get these shots and everything. And I'm standing here going, I used to never see this. It used to just be my group or maybe a little bit younger group of people. And now this entirely new group. So you're right. I think it's the time to do it because these kids have grown up with these devices in their hands and they're not afraid to go out there and do things that are different and create content. And I have to admit, it made me feel a little bit old because I was like, oh, look at these guys. But I got excited because that's the next generation. And those are the people that we need to pull in to be a part to help especially help these clubs grow and stay vibrant and alive so they don't just wither away.
And a lot of the younger members have young families too. And we all remember how much time our kids take, right? And so the time they have to unwind is at the end of the day, but they can't commit a full Sunday or a whole day to go to a BMW CCA event to meet people, right?
Yeah.
And so they can go online and they can kind of have the exact same experience as if they were at an in-person event.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's fantastic. I'd like to talk a bit about what I call our driving inspirations, people that in your career, your past, or even in your present, that have been very influential to you and very helpful. Is there somebody like that in your life?
Well, outside of my dad, I think I've never run into that one person that's been so profound that they've made a dramatic impact on my life. For me, it's always been a lot of different people, nuggets of wisdom or mentoring from a lot of different people. And it's kind of those nuggets that collectively inspire me. So I stay away from all the paid motivators and the actors and the teachers. I prefer real life success stories from real people. I don't believe in instant success. As you know, I mean, it does require hard work to succeed. And that timeline is probably different for everybody. One thing I've learned from talking to different people that things always happen in cycles, I mean, you succeed, you fail. It's a continuous cycle of rinse, learn, and repeat. So I think it's, don't be afraid to fail. It's a key component to achieving success.
Yeah, absolutely. Long, long ago, when I was living down in Southern California, I was coming out of the water. I used to go surfing in the morning before I'd go to work. I lived by the ocean. It was, idyllic. I grew up doing that. And this very tall guy was running down the beach. I mean, he was huge. And I just finished listening to a series of motivational cassette tapes. All of us guys remember what a cassette tape is. At least it's not 8-track. And it turns out it was Tony Robbins. And so I had just listened to his personal power series. It was the first series that he put out. And so I said, hey, Tony, I just listened to your tapes. Long story short, I was working in advertising. He became a client of ours and we started helping him with marketing material. And I went to his firewalk session and did all of that thing. And the reason I bring it up is you say things run in cycles. Now I'm seeing on social media young people doing exactly what Tony was doing, saying the exact same messages about how to be successful. I go, well, Tony's been saying that for 40 years. And he's changed and evolved what he's doing too, especially during COVID. And boy, he's become a success. But you're right. It's just like the other day, while I was down in La Jolla, I saw a kid wearing bell bottoms as big as the ones I wore in high school in the 70s. And I went, well, I guess they're back. If I could only fit into my old bell bottoms, that would make me feel happier. But yeah, it's quite interesting. Challenges, startups. You're a guy who's done startups. You know about challenge, this current one you're working through. Could you talk about a big challenge that you faced? But more importantly, what was that lesson it taught you that you can go, man, I'm glad I went through that. It was a pain in the rear, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I think, my biggest challenge is always the man in the mirror, right? How many obstacles will I create to prevent myself from succeeding? I kind of like to vision success and then go after that vision and continue to refine and make changes along the way to achieve that success. But sometimes I think, yeah, this is just a little too much pain, or the sacrifice I'm making is just a little too great. And maybe I just don't want to do this anymore. So it's a matter of setting goals that are realistic and determining, how much pain and sacrifice do I really want to endure to be successful? And I think I'm always amazing myself where I think I've had enough, and then I realize, no, there's a lot more gas in the tank, and I can continue to push harder and do better. And I kind of liken it a little bit to the paradigm of exercising. It's kind of like saying the most push-ups I can ever do is 25. But then when I get to 25, I'm like, well, maybe I can do 10 more. And then next thing I know, I'm doing 50, and then I'm doing 100, and that's kind of how I look at the biggest challenge of starting a business. Is it's a lot of hard work. And the biggest obstacle I think you'll find, or that I found, was, myself.
Oh, so true. And these days, you look at you mentioned the newbies that come on and say, oh, look at all my success. And they're in front of a mansion with all these cars. And how do you do that? Well, probably not the way you thought. It just gets down to hard work and grit. So, in that same vein, for people listening that might be hitting that first or second or fifth, or if you're an entrepreneur, the 100th wall, you go, oh, this is just why am I doing this? Why can't I just go work for someone else?
Well, it's kind of like when you see an actor on TV and they're at the height of popularity, but you just found out about that actor, right? And you're thinking, wow, this person achieved success. How long did it take? And then you start kind of doing a little research on that actor, and you realize it might have taken them 10 or 15 years to reach that point, And with the internet now, there's so much more information. So you can see when they were doing really bad acting or doing really tough gigs at an early part of their career to where they are today. And the thing about social media and everything that is promoting individuals, they always seem to get to the point where that person's at the pinnacle of success. That's when they have the biggest audience. And so the perception is that person got successful quickly, and I want to do the same thing. But that's not reality. I think people have to set realistic goals for themselves. And if they want to, do something significant with their life and start a business or become an actor or do something like that, you have to kind of set a realistic trajectory or a timeline for yourself, right? And say, I don't need to do it in 1 year. Give me 5 years and kind of take the crawl, walk, run, and start slow. Make measurable gains, that grow each month, each quarter, each year, and you'll get there. But give yourself measurable ways that you can see that you're achieving success. And it could be monthly, it could be yearly, and that'll keep you motivated, and that'll keep you going. And take that data and figure out, what do I need to do to improve so I can improve the metric and continue to grow each year. And you'll get there. And it's different for everybody, right? And sometimes, COVID will interfere with it, but or something like that. But that's the right way to do it and the right perspective to have.
Exactly. Athletes are another great example of that. You look at Michael Jordan and this new movie that's out about his affiliation with Nike, and you realize, when that started, he was really, I won't say he's a nobody because he was somebody, but you know what I mean. You just think Michael Jordan was always famous, always perfect. No, that guy had to work hard. I think he got, couldn't even get into a school at first when he was young. Yeah. So it takes a lot of work. So just the grind. I got to keep at it, keep focusing. But I like your idea of small incremental improvements versus big giant jumps, because that's where you'll let yourself down. And you go back to the man in the mirror. We can be our worst enemies many, many times. And that goes where you have to surround yourself with really positive, good people that can push you along and motivate you as well. When I think about a bucket list for what you're doing right now with this new site, what's your short term, because I don't like to go too far out because things happen like COVID. What's your short-term growth perspective on how you see the site evolving?
Yeah, I'm totally taking the crawl, walk, run approach. I am not expecting that we're going to be a high volume auction site or a high volume listing site. We don't want to be the next .com or the next Bring a Trailer. I really want to focus more on the community and giving people an outlet to connect, to sell cars to other enthusiasts. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a seller and they say, Will, I want to get this price for the car, but if the person's really an enthusiast and I know they're going to love this car as much as I did and they'll maintain it and take as good care of it as I did, then I'm open to a price that we can both live with. But I don't need to sell it for the highest possible price. I'm more interested in this car going to a good home. That's, I think, what kind of embodies the philosophy of what we're all about. And so if we can accomplish that, if we can create a trusted community, and we also are technologically putting things in place. I mentioned the buyer profiles, the collection page, so you can better understand, what a person has in terms of expertise or the cars that they're collecting. We're also tracking a car from who owned it to who bought it, so we can track the history of that vehicle. So we're trying to create all this data and this information on collectors and the cars that they're selling, because people like to buy cars from other collectors. So again, it's coming back to this whole community that we're trying to create, as opposed to just a one-dimensional site to sell vehicles at a high volume. That's absolutely not what we want to be about.
Sure, absolutely. When I had Randy from Bring a Trailer on the show, the first time he was on my show, he talked about launching his auction. And it gave me a great scoop because he announced it on Cars Yeah, which I thought was really cool. But what people don't realize is there was 10 years before that point of him just posting cars and going, this is cool, So it's like, again, not an overnight success.
What year did he start, Mark? That was like 2007 or something, right?
I believe it was. Yeah.
And so people look at the site now and they go, holy smokes, this place is a raging success. But they don't think about how long it took for that site to get to this point.
Yeah, 15 plus years, something like that. And that's years of trust and not screwing up and just slow, the slow grind. So pretty amazing what he's done there. Special vehicles. All my guests are car people. So is there one special vehicle in your life you could share with us? Maybe a cool story?
Yeah, well, that's easy, Mark. That was my first car. That was a 1965 Oldsmobile Delta 88 with the rocket V8.
Oh, wow.
Huge car. It was a four-door. And it had this perfect interior. It just needed a repaint. So I spent an entire summer sanding it. That was really what started my bad back, because I was bent over sanding this car the whole summer.
Yeah.
But I think what was really cool about it, it had this huge bench seat and it was electric, and an electric front seat in a 1965 car was kind of a rare thing. I'd get all my buddies in there and we'd go to a drive-in. And at that time, you didn't think anything of bringing a case of beer with you. And we'd get to the drive-in. I'd tilt that seat all the way back so it would be like a lazy boy recliner, and we'd open up that case of beer and just start telling stories, watching the movie, and just having a great time. So
big car. Yeah, that's a lot of surface to sand. I know, because I was detailing cars when I was a kid, and some of those big cars from the 60s and 70s, I'm like, oh my gosh, there is so much hood on this thing. My father-in-law had Cadillacs all the time, and I remember one of his cars, I said I'd wash it for him. I'm like, I think the hood on this car is as big as my entire car. At least as much metal. So yeah, massive, massive vehicles. I'm a bit of a certified car psychologist here, so I crawl into my guest's head a little bit. If you were reincarnated, manifest as a vehicle, what would you be and why?
I guess I would be a Lamborghini Miura.
Oh, wow. Okay. And why is that?
Well, I think it's as relevant today as it was when it was introduced, I think around 1966. And perhaps it's even more relevant now. I mean, the value of the Miura keeps getting higher and higher, and the Miura just keeps getting better with age. The way it looks, the way it sounds, how it makes you feel, the style, it just evokes a very positive attitude. When it arrives, it commands a real presence. You just don't pull up in a Miura unnoticed.
No, not at all. Yeah, we've got some collectors up here in the Northwest that I always enjoy looking at their cars. And in fact, one of them he's got an orange one. It was on the lawn at Pebble Beach 2 years ago, and maybe it was last year. They're just beautiful, beautiful cars. I remember when I was a kid, there was a doctor in our town who always had cool new cars, and he had a Miura and then went on to get a Countach. And when you'd see him driving that thing around town, it was just like, whoa, it was like a spaceship. It was so beautiful. And I think his was lime green, if I remember right.
Well, and then the whole Lamborghini Ferrari story in itself is pretty cool from that era too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But the Miura was like one of Lamborghini's first cars, which just amazes me.
Well, it does, because the first ones that were just a little bit goofy, and I was like, I don't know about this. And all of a sudden this thing shows up and like, what? And then the Countach shows up and you're like, oh my gosh. And, the rest is history. And they made some really, really crazy cars. A guest recently on the show talked about the Aventador. And I mean, that was another one that was just another step into space age rocket ships, fighter plane cars. It's pretty outstanding what they've done for sure. Fun cars. How about great reading? Is there a great book you could share with our listeners?
Oh boy. Well, I'll tell you, I've been so busy lately. Reading a book is not something that I really have a lot of time with. If I go back a few years, Good to Great by James C. Collins, I found that very inspirational. I've read that book a few times, and just not just from a business perspective, from a personal perspective, I found it very inspirational.
Love that book. Yeah, I love what he's done. He's written some great books. So The Ultimate Drive, before I let you go today, I'm a bit of an enabler here, a good enabler. I'm going to park any car in the world in your driveway. You can take it anywhere in the world for a drive, and you can take anybody with you, even somebody who's no longer with us, which opens up a lot of interesting co-pilots. What does The Ultimate Drive look like for a car guy like you?
I would think that would be Carroll Shelby. And in terms of what we would go in, it would be a real 1965 Cobra, the ones with the side oiler V8. So not a fiberglass replica, but the real deal. I would definitely let Carroll Shelby drive it because he used to race cars and I didn't. And I just think that would be so cool to be driving with the sound of the Cobra engine and the no roof and the wind in the face and just talking about life and business and would he do anything different? I mean, the guy was a real maverick and he just did some really cool things, which to this day, he's still pretty much bigger than life. So I find that would be a pretty cool experience.
The challenge would be hearing him. If you're in that car, that would be something else. I thought about him and maybe taking him for a ride in the new Ford GTs and having his impression of what do you think, because he was a evolutionary type guy. You think about the Cobra, the GT350 Shelby Mustang, the Daytona, Ford GTs. I mean, he was always trying to push ahead. I thought it would be pretty cool. And I ran into Camilo Pardo at the La Jolla Concours Tour, and he was driving he is the new one, not the first gen 07, 8, 9, those, but the new one. And he drove it all the way from Michigan, which is pretty cool. He's the guy who designed those cars. So kind of neat that we got to chat a little bit there as well. So, but that would be cool. Yeah, Carroll Shelby, he's one everybody loves.
Well, and the other thing too, Mark, is how would he drive the car, right? I mean, would he drive it like an old lady and just be talking, or would he be driving it like a race car driver and talking at the same time? So I'm thinking the latter.
Well, if you could bring him back as a bit of a younger guy too, because he had so many health issues. Guy dodged so many bullets. I mean, really. You think about all of his heart issues and all the things he had to go through. But yeah, that would be pretty darn fun. You've taken us on a cool ride today, and I can't thank you enough for spending time sharing what you're up to. Before I let you go, could you share maybe some words of inspiration, a mantra or success quote?
I guess I look at life kind of like taking a drive. Some people like to go from point A to point B and just get there. Some like to take more of a scenic route and explore. Some like to drive the speed limit and just fit in with the masses. And then there are those that want to be reckless and always exceed the speed limit. I guess, there's lots of different metaphors, and there's no right or wrong approach, but it's the approach that brings each of us personal happiness. That's really what counts. So my advice is don't let the perception of others push you into bad driving habits. Do what's right for you.
Yeah, great. Works in life and works in actual driving too. That kid in the jump seat is saying, go faster. Maybe don't listen to him unless you're on the track, for sure. Too easy to get in trouble out there. How can people learn more about Collector Chassis? Where do they go?
Well, that's a great question. So there is a website, collectorchassis.com. And I know chassis is a hard word for some people to say and even harder for some to spell, but it's CHASSIS, collectorchassis.com. There's also I co-host a Manhasset Cars and Coffee, and the word "and" is the ampersand. So Manhasset Cars and Coffee. We also have a YouTube channel with story behind the collector, and people can go there and we talk to collectors about their collections and what makes them interesting to them. Again, fueling the whole stories that we want our community to talk about at Collector Chassis. So
very cool. Well, Will, you've taken us on a fun ride today, and I can't thank you enough for sharing what you're doing and for doing what you're doing. It's very cool, very innovative, very fun, a great place to go. I encourage you listeners to check out Collector Chassis as I have. I think you're going to be there a while and have some fun. Post your car up, have some fun, meet some new people. You never know. If you want to sell a car, you want to find a car, you just want to hang out with some cool car people. Collector Chassis is a place to go. Will, thanks for being so generous today with your time and your expertise, and thanks for what you're doing. Until you and I talk again, I'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. This has been fun. Did you know that less than 3% of all automotive technicians in the U.S. are women? You may not be surprised, but you should be concerned because our country is facing a massive technician shortage right now. Skilled, qualified techs are in high demand, and we need young men and women to consider these viable career paths. Cars Yeah knows that women make great techs. I've interviewed a lot of them, so we support the nonprofit Tech Force Foundation and its Women Tech Rocks initiative to ensure women see themselves in this profession, the industry, and the workforce. Learn more at techforce.org today.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.